The Great Carrollton Debate. First day. Dr. Ditzler's second speech. Brother moderators, the doctor seems to misunderstand the point I made this morning. I now refer to it because I want you to keep in mind what I said and what I meant. After animadverting somewhat loosely on what I said, he goes on to state that, according to me, people were, until within the last 40 years or so, utterly mistaken in regard to the meaning of Greek terms. My statement implied nothing of the sort. I guarded against that. What I did say was that the process of tracing up the primary or original sense in which words were employed is a perfectly modern science. Our advantage, therefore, over those that preceded us is that we have a more certain and satisfactory means of determining what is the primary meaning of a word. We are now able to show by what law of science two meanings may be derived from the primary. That point he has not touched, nor ever will touch, never, because it cannot be touched. The argument we made can never be touched while the world stands. Did not my worthy brother take up the question of primary meaning? Did he not take the position that the meaning, primary and secondary, must be found in the lexicons? The context must determine in which sense a word is used. We have to find what the authors themselves intended by the terms they employed. Moses Stuart leaves the question in entire doubt as to the primary meaning of bapto and baptizo, saying it was uncertain. So everybody else leaves it that does not recognize that law of scientific investigation to which I have referred. The first meaning set down by lexicographers is the meaning that appears at first sight of the occurrences. They happen to have the current meaning, but this is by no means the primary meaning. Now, I appeal to every man in this house, to the ignorant as well as the educated, whether my worthy opponent has uttered a single word or adduced a solitary fact, to show that he has any scientific ground for his theory that dip or immerse is the primary meaning of baptizo. To show what its primary meaning is, a man has to trace up the word and find what its first meaning was at a period no less remote than 1500 years before Christ. Primary, what does that mean? Does it not mean the first? Then, as baptizo, in the sense of immerse, is never found in any Greek writer until about 165 years before Christ, and as this was among the latest meanings the word came to have, how absurd to call it its primary meaning. That the current meaning is the primary one, I know Baptists all assume, but there is no science in it. Such an assumption is in utter contravention of the recognized laws of philological investigation. To come down 14 or 1500 years in the history of a language, and then to seize on some new meaning that has been engrafted on an old word, and then to claim that this is its primary meaning, is an absurdity too transparent to require refutation. As to Sophocles, he treats only of Iron Age Greek, is not an authority in the learned world, and is not to be compared with any one of the greater lexicographers we gave, among whom were native Greeks also. Gazes, e.g., giving poured upon, while Sophocles says, perform ablution, bathed in tears, Greek, baptized, dacrusi with tears, to baptize, New Testament everywhere. Dr. G started on philology, and to our amazement cut across for Jordan at once, abandoning all his line. I'll get there in time. As we have nothing further to answer, we resume where we left off. The great issue on this question, from the standpoint of our opponent, turns upon the primary meaning of baptizo, which involves the science of language, fundamental principles of philology. Hence we resume where we stopped. We were showing that great numbers of words that primarily meant to sprinkle, to pour, to moisten, where it is by sprinkling, came to mean all that baptizo ever means. On the contrary, no word in existence that properly or primarily means to immerse ever comes to mean what all agree baptizo does mean, have its applications. 2. Katantau, to sprinkle or pour, sprinkle upon, to pour upon. See Paso, Stephanus, Galen, Dunbar, and Pickering. To pour upon, to bathe with water, to soothe with eloquence, to overwhelm with, or pour out ridicule upon one. Notice well this word of effusion. It covers a number of meanings in baptizo, among them to pour ridicule upon, i.e., pour a torrent of abuse upon one. Notice the overwhelm from pour upon. 3. Brecho. This word is also doubly important because two native Greek lexicographers define both bapto and baptizo with it, while the learned Schneider, in his lexicon, puts it as the general equivalent of baptizo as the general import. Passo, to wet, moisten, sprinkle. Passive, to be wet, receive moisture, be wet with rain, to tipple, be drunk, overfill with wine, drunk, pour upon, overwhelm. Pickering. Moisten, wet, water, bedew, sprinkle, etc. Rain, shower, wet, soak, drink. Yet embreco is by the lexicons, dip, immerse, repeatedly. Stephanus, intingere, immergere, dip, immerse, passo, to soak, dip in. 4. Doo, enduo, medidus would show like results. So the Latin medeo, medidus, wet, moist, soft, intoxicated, drunken, soaked, dipped, dyed. Bullion's Latin lexicon, 1869. See White's late one also. Tingo, Greek tango, would show same principles. Zarek, in Arabic, sprinkle, besprinkle, then color, dye. Metatha, moisten with ointment or paint, perfuse, etc., then immerse one's self in water, immersion. In a word, words never begin with immerse as their primary meaning, and then come to mean what all parties admit bapto and baptizo mean. Such a process is wholly opposed to all the laws of language. On the contrary, all the laws and the whole science of language show conclusively that the only method by which the facts, viz., the phenomena of the facts of bapto and baptizo, can be harmonized, is by starting with sprinkle as its primary force. We have thus demonstrated our third, fourth, and fifth propositions. Let us now see if these phenomena of language do not hold good as applied to the actual facts as further discovered in the earlier Greek. We appeal to the earlier Greek classics. It is in vain that a Casaubon, or Vossius, Beza, etc., should appeal to a Plutarch or a Polybius, 15 to 1800 years from the birth and spoken form, and 1,000 from the written form in which the Greek appeared, to find out thence what were primary meanings, when even they never dreamed of comparative philology and great underlying laws by which word-building went on and meanings developed. Their opinion is nothing here. We see that the lexicons all stop with Polybius as the earliest writer that uses baptizo in the sense of immerse. He also uses it in other senses. They give him also as the earliest using it literally. He flourished some 165 years BC. They cite Plato, born BC 429, as the earliest for a metaphorical meaning, he using it 3 times, always metaphorically, twice for intoxicate, rendered, overwhelmed by Conant, Carson, A. Campbell, etc., always. Is this science? Is it philology? Polybius, living in the decline of the Iron Age of the Greek, Plutarch, Josephus, who will risk his reputation now by saying such is the process by which we are to discover the laws of language? Such empiricism is gone forever. The method of science requires that we collect all the earliest cases of the word to be found, record their dates, discover the respective meanings, literal or metaphorical, then apply the inductive method and discover the truth of the phenomena, the laws that will harmonize all the facts. First, get the facts. Then no law is correct, no method safe, that will not explain the facts, assign a why, how. We have already made much headway. We will test the matter further. 1. The first Greek that has yet been found to use baptizo is Pindar, born BC 522 years. He uses it but once in a metaphorical sense for slander, abuse, the rage and vituperation of his enemies and its impotence. Quote, "For as when the rest of the net is toiling deep in the sea, I, as a cork, am above the net, unbaptized of the sea, i.e., by its raging, dashing waters. Literally, I am unbaptized of its salt water. That is, their rage no more hurts him than the sea water, with all its salt, which is fearfully biting, hurts or affects the cork. Some might render, overwhelm the cork." 2. Aristophanes, born BC 450, uses it next, once. He uses it metaphorically also. Thus, for he is praised, says he. Because he baptized ebaptizen the stewards, poured a torrent of abuse upon them. 3. Plato, born BC 429, uses it 3 times, metaphorically each time. Once when Clinias, a youth, was baptized with questions put to him so rapidly that he became overwhelmed or confused with them. In the other 2 cases, the parties were baptized with wine, rendered overwhelmed by all immersionist writers. 4. Alcibiades, born BC 400, alluding to the offensive and opprobrious epithets applied to him by a comedian in the play called Bapte, says, "You, baptes bapto, root of baptizo, bespatted, or aspersed me, with the abusive epithets in your play, but I, baptizing thee baptizo, as with waves of the sea will destroy thee with streams more bitter." 5. Demosthenes, born BC 385, referring to the relative abusive powers of Philip and his enemies, the orator says, "Not the speakers, for they know how to baptize with this fellow. They can match him in foul words or fierce abuse." We have enough now to make a pause. My worthy and distinguished brother has risked everything on the primary meaning of baptizo, and immerse, he claims, is its primary meaning. But take the lexicons. Carson, Booth, and others, failing to find support for their theory from the lexicons, reject them. I accept the lexicons. Their laws of philology, however, I do not accept. But we take their meanings and show that these are explained by those passages in the classics that give these meanings. Now, my brother gives a law of language, that anything or person to be sprinkled must be scattered in drops. If so, then the idea is that in Hebrew, to be sprinkled means to be scattered in drops. Now, let us see how this canon of criticism will work. I take the 51st Psalm, 9th verse, "Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean." In the Syriac, Greek, and Latin, rusi, rontis me, asperges me. It is sprinkle me, etc. Scatter me in drops? No. I could give you quotations in Greek and Latin in which, though water is the element and sprinkling the mode, yet the person or object affected by it is said to be sprinkled. In Plutarch, the priests commanded the people entering the temple, rantizain, sutus, to sprinkle themselves. There are many words meaning to sprinkle, some of which mean in Hebrew, Greek, etc., to scatter, disperse, never moisten, wet, stain. Many others never mean scatter, disperse, but from sprinkle of liquids mean to moisten, wet, bedew, stain, colour, all which take the direct accusative and no intervening prepositions such as upon, on, etc. And such is bapto and baptizo. So, Hebrews chapter 9, verses 19 and 21, Moses sprinkled the book, the people, the tabernacle, and the vessels of the ministry. Did he scatter them in drops? In all languages, many, very many words occur, meaning sprinkle, that mean to moisten, wet, colour, dip, immerse, all taking the accusative as the direct object of the verb, which forever destroys the doctor's position. Now notice what my worthy brother has said about our English version of the New Testament. He seems to think that the translators have not done justice to the immersionist idea involved in the Greek particle, en, that, in fact, they have allowed their predilection for sprinkling as the mode of baptism to control them in rendering that term into English, as they have done by with. The doctor claims that on means in. Well, I admit that this is its more general meaning when used of a local relation, but it is not so in any of these cases. But does it not also mean with? Can these translators be supposed to have been opposed to immersion when they had all of them been baptized by dipping? Luther, in his German translation of the New Testament, renders en by mit, with. So a large number of versions have done, as well as 6 other English versions. 6. We have given you every occurrence of the word down to this period. The next who uses it is the great Stagirite, Aristotle, and, in a literal sense, I am glad to say, and hence we pause on these metaphorical uses of baptizo in the classics. Shakespeare, Bunyan, and the mass of people use the following terms in the connections above, quote, "Those haughty words of hers bespattered me," etc. Bunyan, foul aspersion. A. Campbell and Rice, foul aspersion. Debate, 645. So Dryden W. Scott, we use base aspersion, foul aspersion, for such abuse, but aspersion is sprinkling, means to sprinkle. Pindar and the ancients used the word sprinkle also for praising, at times. Sprinkle with eulogies. A striking case occurs in Athenaeus, a later Greek. Quote, "You seem to me, O guests, to be strangely flooded, katantantlesthus, with vehement words, while also waiting to be baptized. Bebaptistai, flooded or drenched with undiluted wine." Notice here, first, katantleo meaning to flood, and played upon by the wit as of a like sense with baptize, waiting to be baptized with wine. You are busy. It does not repeat baptize, but a word of same force there, katantleo, flooded, overwhelmed, overwhelming others with words some would prefer, waiting to be so with wine. But the word here rendered by Conant, the Baptist, flooded, used in same sense with baptizo, primarily means to sprinkle, to pour. This no one will deny, we presume. This gives us another illustration of philology, as well as of the word's meaning. As yet now, first, baptizo never yet means to immerse, etc. Second, it implies a fusion, was based upon that idea in its metaphorical uses every time, save in Plato. In him, once it is based on that evidently. In the other two cases, it is to be drunk. But in Hebrew, Arabic, Latin, etc., words primarily meaning to moisten, when it is by tears, rain, dew, to sprinkle, etc. We saw come to mean to get or make drunk, not words primarily meaning to immerse. Hence, these two uses point to sprinkle as the primary meaning. Let us now see in what sense Aristotle, born BC 380 years, the most learned Greek that ever lived, used it. He, too, used it only once in all his voluminous works. He tells us of a certain places full of rushes and seaweed, which, when it is ebb tide, are not baptized, me baptizestai, overflowed, but at full tide are overflowed, katakludzestai. As A. Campbell and M. Stewart tell us, these two words are used in precisely the same sense here. We have, then, the most important data possible here, given by the most profound thinkers and scholars of the world. We have 1. The first literal occurrence of baptizo in the world. 2. It does not here mean to immerse, or dip, or plunge. 3. It is the application of the element, the baptizing element, to the stationary, immovable object baptized. But in that other word, katakludzo, equivalent to baptizo, we have philological light. It is compounded of kata, a preposition. Another later Greek uses perikludzo also to express the act of classic baptism. So, let us look at it closely. Primarily, kludzo means to bedash, be sprinkle, or ensprinkle with water, implying more or less of force. Our word kleister is the noun from it. Budaeus, Stephanus, and the glosses all give sprinkle for perikludzo, thus periklusmati. Aspergine, verb, aspergo, perfundo. See Stephanus, passo, wash, bedash, wet, etc. See first reply. We see here, then, that the way by which a word that primarily applies to inspersions, aspersions, comes to mean all that baptizo does. Thus, you see, there is no meaning in baptizo, but that is promptly, easily, and scientifically explained, illustrated over and again on this basis. But start with immerse, and not a point in it can be explained by any rule or law that will stand the test. Then, the great facts, the essential facts of its meanings, cannot be explained at all. 1. You have to travel centuries down before you arrive at a literal meaning at all. 2. When you come to that, it is against you. 3. You then have to travel on till you reach Polybius, Plutarch, Josephus, etc., to mean immerse. 4. Then you have a body of meanings in those writers and others that show immerse could not have been its earlier or primary meaning. It now means beside, sprinkle, pour, wash, intoxicate, overflow, overwhelm, immerse. 1. But wash is older than immerse, as a meaning of baptizo, by over a century or so. Hence, wash is not derived from immerse as a meaning of baptizo. 2. No word on earth primarily meaning to immerse, nor to wash, but baptizo does come to mean to wash, hence immerse never was its primary meaning. 3. Baptizo means, derivatively, to overflow. No word primarily and properly meaning to immerse ever means to overflow. Therefore, baptizo never meant primarily to immerse. But words primarily meaning to sprinkle, vast numbers of them, do come to mean to overflow and to wash, to cleanse, and it is the rule, the habitual law of language. Hence, it is certain baptizo primarily meant to sprinkle, so we could apply the other meanings of baptizo, but this is enough now. Dr. Ditzler ends his speech.